Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Leighton Cassette Movie Review Podcast. I'm your host, Mark B., and I'm going to be reviewing movies mostly from the golden age of cassette tapes. The first movie I'll be reviewing is Tim Burton's 1989 hit Batman. Being that it's the 30th anniversary of Batman, and that it's one of my favorite movies from when I was a kid, I felt it would be appropriate to make this the inaugural episode. Before I get into the actual movie, I'm going to give you some backstory because this is one of the most interesting stories on how Batman came to be. The story begins with Michael Uslan. He got a comic book course accredited at Indiana University where he was a student. And this got a lot of publicity in the papers. Michael received a call from Saul Harrison, VP of DC Comics in New York, to see if they could work together. And shortly after this, Michael got a job at United Artists in New York. He met Ben Melniker and made a deal to secure a movie option for Batman. October 3rd, 1979, Bat Films Production Incorporated was founded, but they were turned down by every major studio in Hollywood when they went to make their pitch. Ben called Peter Guber and Neil Bogart of Casablanca Films. Michael and Ben then went to meet Peter and they secured a deal. Casablanca was associated with Universal, and Universal also passed on Batman. Afterwards, they secured a deal with Warner Brothers, who owned DC Comics, and Warner Brothers also made the Superman movie in 1978. However, no one at the studio could agree on a tone or direction for the movie. Joe Dante, director of Gremlins, Ivan Reitman from Ghostbusters were involved at different points in time with the movie. However, the specter of the campy 1960s Adam West TV show loomed over the Batman project until the tone was shifted into more serious, reflecting the comics at the time, The Dark Knight Returns, Death in the Family, and so on. Lots of different ideas were pitched for the movie: Art Deco, a period piece, and before the dark and serious tone, a comedy was even pitched with Bill Murray as Batman and Eddie Murphy as Robin. Tim Burton was then brought on. Burton's first movie for Warner Brothers was Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and Tim recruited Sam Hamm to help write the screenplay. Shortly after Beetlejuice was considered a success, Batman was greenlit with Burton as the director. Originally, Robin was supposed to be in the movie at the end, but he was cut due to the story structure and I believe just time. Michael Keaton was eventually cast as Batman, and the backlash was humongous. Probably, I would say, like Ben Affleck. I don't know, I wasn't born yet. I was born shortly before Batman came out in 1989. But shortly after Michael Keaton was cast, Jack Nicholson was cast as the Joker. Instead of a standard $10 million fee, he asked for $6 million instead, and a percentage of the box office and merchandise sales. It's estimated he earned between 50 to 100 million. I've looked, some say 100, some say 50, so I would say it's in that ballpark somewhere. That's a pretty big area, but it's somewhere in there. Kim Basinger was cast as photojournalist and love interest to Bruce Wayne, Vicky Vale, shortly after actress Sean Young fell off a horse, breaking her arm rehearsing for a scene that was cut where Bruce Wayne and Vicky Vale were horseback riding. It was the most expensive movie ever made at the time at about $35 million. It was filmed at Pinewood Studios in England, and Antoine First was the production designer, and he did win an Academy Award for the design of the Batman set. Halfway through production, producer John Peters and Jack Nicholson went and saw Phantom of the Opera, and they took inspiration from the climax of the movie, which takes place in a tower, and they decided they needed to use it in Batman. Tim Burton rewrote two key scenes in the movie following a writer's strike where Sam Hamm exited the picture, and that was Joker killing Batman's parents and Alfred letting Vicky Vale into the Batcave. And this caused a huge unhappiness with the dedicated hardcore fans. Tim brought on Danny Elfman to do the score, and he did not have a big movie score yet, so this was his first, and Prince did the soundtrack to the movie, which makes it very interesting. Due to all the uncertainty surrounding the project, John Peters cut a trailer, and the trailer became so popular that crowds went to the movies just to see the trailer, and they would leave after it was over. Posters from bus stations were being stolen, posters of the Bat logo. Batman was really shaping up to be a phenomenon. It opened on June 23rd, 1989, and set the opening weekend record of $49 million. And that beat Ghostbusters 2 record that was set the previous weekend. Ghostbusters brought in 29.4 million, and correction, it brought in 40.49 million. Batman was the fastest film to reach $100 million, doing it in 11 days. Its final box office earnings was 411.35 million worldwide when its theatrical run ended in December 1989. It was released on VHS in December for a suggested retail price of $24.95, making it one of the cheapest VHS tapes to buy. Usually VHS tapes to buy were around $90. Now we'll get into the plot. The movie starts by going through a giant stone bat symbol in the opening credits. Jack Nicholson also received top billing as part of his deal. It says DC Magazines instead of DC Comics. I don't know if they were too embarrassed to put comics or they thought magazine sounded better, but if you watch the opening credits to Batman 1989, that's what it says is DC Magazines. And spoiler warning, I've had 30 years to see it, so. After the credits, we start with a shot of Gotham, and this Batman movie shows that it's trying to be a dark and gritty movie by having a prostitute approach an underage kid. Don't know for sure that she was trying to get him to procure her services, but it definitely seems that way. Now, we assume that the kid, he's with his mother and father, and we assume they're a family of tourists. Now we follow them throughout the first few minutes of the movie, and they walk into a dark alley where a beggar asks them for a cup of money, and they just go right past them. But then a guy comes from around the corner behind him and knocks the father down and pushes the child and mother up to a wall in gunpoint and steals the father's wallet and run away. The mother screams, and then we get our first shot, an overhead shot of Batman, and it appears he just watches the muggers steal from this family and run away. But he does, in one of the iconic shots of the movie, the muggers are sitting on the roof talking about the legend of the Bat, and the camera's kind of panned out, and we see Batman's silhouette come down, and then he walks over towards the muggers. As they continue to argue about the legend of the Bat, he makes a noise, and they turn around, look up, and then they see him jump down. They shoot at him a few times. He falls down, but then he gets back up, and he takes them both out. And then he grabs one of them and tells him to he wants him to tell all his friends about him, and he says he's Batman before he throws him down and disappears into the night. After this scene, we cut to a press conference introducing new DA Harvey Dent, played by Billy D. Williams, who played Lando Calrissian in the Star Wars movie. And there's a place at a table set for Bruce Wayne next to Commissioner Gordon, but of course, he's not there. We then cut to Jack Napier watching the press conference on his TV with his boss Carl Grissom's girlfriend, who he's having an affair with, key plot point. And the girlfriend is played by Jerry Hall, former wife of Mick Jagger. We then return to the scene of the crime where the muggers were taken out, and we are introduced to crooked police detective Lieutenant Eckhart, who's supervising the crime scene. And then our comic relief quotes, Alexander Knox, played by Robert Wool, is a reporter who is really the only believer of the Batman. Eckhart denies the existence of the Bat when questioned by Knox, while one of the muggers walking by tells the police he was attacked by a giant bat. Eckhart then walks, after the Eckhart and Knox exchange and the mugger walks by, Eckhart walks through an alley and he meets with Jack Napier. And you can see there's obvious tension between them. And the scene ends with Napier pulling a gun on Eckhart. Well, Eckhart pulled the gun on Napier, and then Napier's, I guess it's his goon, Bob, pulls a gun on him, and that kind of ends the scene with them passively aggressively threatening each other. The next morning, we see Knox walking through the newsroom, and he is definitely mocked by his fellow reporters and co-workers for his belief in the Batman. When Knox arrives at his desk, he sees Vicky Vale there, and she offers to help him prove the existence of the Batman, as she thinks this would be a Pulitzer Prize-worthy story. They plan to attend a fundraiser at Bruce Wayne's mansion that night to help raise money for the city's 200th anniversary, which is the main backdrop for the movie. Knox then hits on Vicky Vale, which he does for the entirety, almost, of the time they share on screen. This would definitely be a hashtag #MeToo problem in our current day and climate. We are then introduced to crime boss Carl Grissom in the next scene. He's played by legendary actor Jack Palance, and he's having a meeting with his crew, and Grissom is worried that if Harvey Dent can make a connection between Grissom and Access Chemicals, that they would be finished and Grissom would be locked up. Napier jokingly suggests breaking in and trashing the office, taking the records, and saying it was corporate espionage. Grissom agrees to the idea almost instantly and sends Jack and the crew to do the work. Now, what we find out after Jack and the crew exit the scene is that Grissom picks up the phone and calls Lieutenant Eckhart. So it's implied that Grissom definitely knows about Jack and his tryst with Grissom's girlfriend. Meanwhile, across town, we get some funny bits from the fundraiser party. Vicky is looking for Bruce Wayne, and she comes across Bruce Wayne and asks him if he knows which one of these guys is Bruce Wayne. He jokingly says, "Well, I'm not sure," and she turns around and walks away. And Bruce is setting stuff everywhere, a wine glass on a craps table, I guess it was, and setting a pen and like a plant decoration, and Alfred's behind him picking the stuff up, which is pretty humorous. While Vicky's trying to track down Bruce Wayne, Knox asks Commissioner Gordon, Dent, the mayor about the possibility of the existence of the Batman, and they all pretty much just blow him off. Then Gordon gets told he has a cop there, someone's there to see him, and that comes into play. Knox and Vicky attempt to follow Gordon, and they end up in a room where Bruce Wayne has different displays of warrior uniforms and things from around the world. Bruce is walking behind Knox, and Vicky are both kind of insulting Knox a lot more harshly than Vicky is. They're having some friendly banter when Alfred comes in and tells him that Commissioner Gordon had to leave rather unexpectedly. Another funny bit, Bruce goes to walk towards the back of the room, and Alfred says, "No, this way, sir," and then Knox, and he makes fun of Bruce some more while Bruce is leaving the room. Bruce apparently has cameras everywhere as he goes down to, and we get our first glimpse of the Batcave. He's sitting at the desk, and he's going through security cam footage, and he sees the cop arrive and tell Gordon that Jack Napier is going to Access Chemicals, and the cop and Gordon leave to go try and bust it up. And when we get to Access Chemicals, we see that Jack and the rest of the crew are trying to get into the safe, and when they break in, they see that all the files have been removed already, and Jack's pretty much deduces that they've been ratted out. Now, as they enter the, I guess it would be the working area of the plant, a cop's there, and he tells one cop, and he says freeze, and then they shoot at him, and he shoots back, and then we get a giant shootout between the mob and the police. Gordon then shows up with reinforcements, and he lets Eckhart know that he pretty much knows that he's in cahoots with Grissom, and Eckhart's yelling out of a blowhorn, and he said that, Jack Napier, dead or alive. And Gordon grabs the bullhorn off him and says that anyone who opens fire on Jack Napier will answer to him as Eckhart waddles away. Now, as the shootout's going on, Batman shows up and takes some of the mob guys out. And this is the first time the police have actually seen the Batman. Napier and Batman come face to face towards the end of the scene. Jack shoots Eckhart right in front of Gordon, so he would definitely be going to jail for murder, no matter what happened, if they could apprehend him. He has a great reaction to seeing Batman. He just yells, not really yells, but he goes, Jesus! And then he kind of tries to play cool, play it off, and then he shoots Eckhart, and then he goes to shoot Batman, and Batman puts up one of his gauntlets, and the bullet ricochets and gets Napier in the face, and he goes over the side and grabs onto a rail, and Batman goes over to grab his hand to try and save him and pull him up, but he eventually falls down and into the pit of acid, the vat of acid. Gordon tells Batman to hold it right there, but he drops a smoke pellet, shoots his grapple gun up in the air, and he takes off, and the police Gordon decides, and he tells his compadre there with him to keep a lid on it until they figure out what exactly is going on with the Batman character. Now, the next morning, Vicky and Knox are trying to piece together what happened, and Vicky tells Knox she has a date with Bruce Wayne, which he is not too happy about. And when we arrive at Wayne Manor for the date between Vicky and Bruce, they're sitting on opposite ends of a very large table. I'm sure it was for comedic effect. And Bruce asked Vicky if she had trouble finding the house despite her being there the night before, I would assume. Another little bit of comedy. She asks Bruce if he likes eating in there, and he replies, "Oh yeah," and then he looks around and says he's not sure he's ever been in that room before. So they leave, and they go and actually spend some time with Alfred, which we presume he tells some embarrassing stories about Bruce before leaving to go to bed, insisting that they leave the dishes there for him to clean up in the morning. And then after this scene, we go to a back alley plastic surgeon, I would assume, who Napier went to after the acid fall. And after the surgeon removes the bandages and Napier demands a mirror, he starts laughing uncontrollably and smashes the mirror. The scene ends with him walking out of the plastic surgeon's, I don't even want to dignify it by calling it an office, but where he works, and laughing. And then we go back to Wayne Manor, where Vicky must have slammed someone because she's shit-faced, and Bruce commits what would have been another big #MeToo violation by making out and presumably sleeping with her. As this is going on between Vicky and Bruce, Jack shows up at Grissom's office, apartment, whatever it is, revealing he knew Grissom set him up. Grissom went to grab a gun before Jack tells him not to bother. Jack tells him he's going to kill him, and then Grissom tries to desperately cut a deal with Jack before Jack steps out of the darkness and into the light in another iconic shot revealing his new name, Joker, and his makeup before he shoots Grissom to death. After this, we get another visual gag with Bruce hanging upside down, sleeping like a bat, but the argument's been made that he was exercising and not necessarily sleeping. It does seem like he's exercising because you do see his arms move a little bit. I don't think anybody could sleep like that. I think it was just done for a goof for the movie, but people took it so fucking seriously. Vicky wakes Bruce up the next morning when she goes to leave for work, and Bruce is definitely a hit it and quit it guy as he tells Vicky that he has to go out of town for a few days. And when she goes downstairs, she tells Alfred that she'll see him when they get back, and Alfred says, "Well, we're not going anywhere." Way to blow your boy's cover, Alfred. Now, Grissom's girlfriend, Jack's mistress, walks in and faints after seeing him on the couch with the makeup on. It's not known whether she told Grissom about the affair, but she definitely was not expecting to see him. Though I guess they did report the next morning that Jack had been killed in the shootout at Access Chemicals, so I Guess that would make sense why she would not expect to see him sitting on her couch. We then go to a meeting with Jack and the other crime bosses in the city, and he tells them that Grissom is incapacitated and that Grissom has left him in charge. He's met with some resistance from a boss named Tony, so Jack tells them all they gotta do is shake hands and they'll be friends and that's it. Well, when they shake hands, Jack has something in his hand that burns Tony, I guess. I don't know what to say about that, but his face catches on fire, and when he's done shaking his hand, he pushes Tony's body down into the chair he was sitting in, and it's just a charred corpse. There's no skin, flesh, anything left on the body, just a charred skeleton. Vicky shows us her inner stalker as she's waiting outside Wayne Manor and tails Bruce after she can't find any information out about him. Which is pretty funny considering he's supposed to be one of the richest people in Gotham, probably the richest guy in Gotham, and his parents' murder would have been front page news, as it was, as we find out later. She follows him to Crime Alley, where he places 2 roses at the site of his parents' murder. At an impromptu press conference, one of the gangsters that Joker was talking to earlier is murdered by the Joker with a feather. He just stabs it in his neck, and we have mimes there, and they pull out machine guns, and they just start shooting into the air, and I guess just to get away. Bruce, who happened upon the press conference, somehow figures out that Jack Napier survived, and he is the Joker. When he returns home, he tells Alfred that he needs to find everything they can on Jack Napier, and Alfred also begins his 4-movie-long quest in this original Batman series of trying to get Bruce Wayne a wife and get him laid. Well, getting laid's not a problem. Keeping a relationship, that's the problem. Vicky then asks Knox to try and figure out what's so special about the alley where Bruce dropped the roses at. Joker had sent Bob, his goon, he's literally called Bob the Goon, to take pictures and to find out what was up at the press conference with Knox. It's never really stated why Joker wanted Bob to tail Knox, but he did. And then after seeing a picture with Vicky Vale, the Joker becomes infatuated with her, and then the movie becomes a love square, I guess, because Vicky loves Bruce, Alex and Joker both love Vicky, and Bruce wants nothing to do with Vicky. He just wants to pound it, and that's it. And it's funny when Joker asks Bob about who the girl is. Bob the Goon says her name's Vicky Vale, and she's dating some guy named Wayne. They went on one date, and don't think that anybody besides Knox and Alfred knew about that, so that's pretty interesting where he came upon that information at. Shortly after this, we see a news report on deaths of 2 models and various other people who have died at beauty salons and stuff around Gotham. And then when a news bulletin of 2 more deaths come in, one of the anchors starts laughing uncontrollably and falls over on her chair and dies. Then a transmission cuts into the news feed from the Joker, revealing he has poisoned some of the goods in Gotham and it's killing civilians. As this transmission is going on, Alfred brings Bruce the information the police have on Jack. And as Bruce goes through the file, he finds that Jack has an aptitude for chemistry as well as art and science. And we cut what we assume is a few days later, and we see more news footage of some disheveled-looking anchors who clearly haven't showered or have any good hygiene. Ponder what goods are being poisoned that's killing the civilians of Gotham City. Next is one of the big action pieces of the movie. We go to a museum where Vicky thinks she's meeting with Bruce, but in actuality she was lured there by the Joker. She waits for a long time before getting a gift delivered to her. It's a gas mask, and in crayon it says, "Urgent, put this on now." And then before she puts it on, we start seeing smoke coming through vents and people start falling over and I guess dying. It never really says if they lived or died, if the gas knocked them out, but it's the Joker, so we assume that it killed them. The Joker then comes through into the museum after everybody's been killed, and they start defacing the art to the Prince song, Party Man. Yes, this was definitely the 80s. After defacing all the art, Joker arrives at Vicky's table and says he wants to see some of her work. He says most of it is crap except for a picture of a body, a dead body presumably, that she had photographed. He intimidates her for a little bit for information on Batman, and then he brings in Alicia, which we find out's the name of the girlfriend that caused the rift between Jack and Grissom. He intimidates Vicky and backs her up against the wall and goes to shoot acid in her face from his posy, which is what he presumably did to Alicia because she has acid marks all over her face. Burn marks, rather. As tension in the scene is ramping up, Batman comes crashing through the skylight and saves Vicky Vale. She left a message on Bruce Wayne's answering machine saying that she was going to be late to the museum, which he found suspicious since he had no plans on meeting her. He then rescues her and they zip line out the door and he tells her to get into a car. She says which one. They're all purple cars with green roofs except one, and we get our first appearance of the Batmobile. They speed down the street trying to get away from the Joker. This Batman definitely doesn't fight unless he knows for sure he can win. But then they end up causing a traffic jam and they have to ditch the Batmobile. And he calls for shields, which come up and protect the Batmobile. You can definitely see, being that this was 1989 and watching it in 2019, that it's computer animated and it's not, or generated, and it's not very believable, but it's still a cool visual to see the Batmobile covered with all the shields even all these years later. They run down an alley and attempt to grapple up a catwalk, and he asks Vicky in another little humorous bit how much she weighs, and she says about 108 she thinks, but they get stuck halfway up. And he tells Vicky to grab the grapple gun off of his belt, but whatever she does, not to let go of him, which she definitely does let go of him, and he falls down to the ground. And he tries to fight back, but the goons shoot him. They go to take another funny thing. Bob tells the goons to check his wallet, and then they decide to just take his mask off, and Vicky leans over to take a picture while they're trying to unmask him. And they see the flashbulb, and Bob screams to shoot her, and they turn around to start shooting her. And while this is happening, Batman gets up and proceeds to take out all the goons except Bob, who runs away. We also get a swordsman appear, and he lets out these yells, and he moves these swords real quick, and all it takes is one kick from Batman, and he's down for the count. After Vicky comes down from the catwalk, he makes a quip about her weight, and he has the Batmobile. I guess remotely, the Batmobile can tell where he is, and the Batmobile drives to them. And then they get in the Batmobile and start towards the Batcave. Once they arrive at the Batcave, he reveals that he figured out how the Joker was poisoning people. One product can't do it alone, but products mixed together, a combination of hairspray with perfume, so on and so forth, deodorant, and he gives Vicky all the information that he found out about the poison chemicals, and then he presumably steals the film from her because Vicky asked if that's all he wanted, and he said no, there's one other thing, and he moves his arm up and the cape comes over the screen. We see bats, it fades to black, and then we wake up, and then we see the next morning we see Vicky wake up and she grabs her, I guess where her bra is, and says, oh, he took the film. She calls Knox and asks them if they can make the evening edition with the code Batman's cracked. And they do, and Joker sees the news coverage of them figuring out what it was that he was poisoning with, and he shoots the TV and resolves to kill the Batman. We see Bruce sitting in the cave, and Alfred suggests that he tell Vicky he's Batman. He goes to her apartment to do just that, and he tries to get it out, but then the Joker interrupts. Bruce scurries off to her bedroom to avoid being seen by the Joker and his crew. And then Bruce emerges after the Joker tells her Alicia threw herself out the window. Bruce drops hints to the Joker he knows he's Jack Napier. But then, in one of the more unintentionally funny moments, he grabs a fire poker, smashes a vase, and he screams at the top of his lungs. If you want to get nuts, let's get nuts. And this is one of the most lampooned and quoted lines from the movie. It is really something, considering how calm and almost docile Bruce is throughout the whole movie. The Joker then draws a gun and asks him if he ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight. Bruce gets a puzzled look on his face and says, "What?" And the Joker says, "I just like the sound of it," and he shoots him in the chest. Joker and his crew then leave, dragging Vicky to the door with him before he says he's only laughing on the outside. On the inside, he's crying. Vicky turns around after Joker leaves to go run back to Bruce, but sees he's gone. She walks over to where he was laying and sees a piece of silver with a bullet in it he used to protect himself. She then opens a present the Joker brought from her and faints when a hand holding a bouquet of dead flowers springs up like a jack-in-the-box. Now in our next scene, we see Noxus and Vicky in, I guess it's the research room where they have all the old papers on one of those old, I have no idea what they are, but they can go through all the old papers from back in the day, and Knox informs Vicky he found out that Bruce's parents were murdered in that alley where he left the flowers at. Vicky then storms off, and then we go to the Batcave where Bruce thumbs through a file on his parents' death. Now, right after this, we go to a press conference where the mayor and Gordon are there and Harvey Dent, where they are announcing that they are canceling the 200th anniversary parade. The Joker interrupts this feed with another transmission, and he proclaims his innocence and that he will give away $20 million in cash at midnight and challenges Batman to show up. Bruce, watching this, then has a flashback or a daydream to the night his parents were murdered. And remembering, the killer asked the same question that the Joker had asked him at Bale's apartment. Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? Now, it's this scene and the scene that happens next, which is what people have a big problem with. When Bruce snaps out of his daydream flashback, he looks over and sees Alfred and Vicky in the Batcave. She proclaims her love for him, despite only one date, and she wants to try and love him, and she wants to have a relationship, and he tells her that he has to go to work, and he heads off into the night. He starts off by blowing up Access Chemicals with the Batmobile, thinking the Joker may have been inside, and then after the Batmobile's done blowing stuff up and shooting stuff, he hears a helicopter and hears the Joker's voice. He turns around, the Joker taunts him from a helicopter, an awesome helicopter that for somehow he got his logo painted on the side of. We're then treated to our second Prince song, Trust, as the Joker and his goons throw money from the parade floats. He then tells the people he's going to poison them with gas, and the balloons, the helium balloons, the big balloons, they have big canisters of gas, and the gas starts leaking out from them. Now the people scatter, and Knox actually tries to take out some of the thugs before getting hit by Vicky with a car, and Vicky ends up driving down the road a little bit with Knox on the car and stops and throws Knox into a pile of garbage, which is where most people who have seen this movie think he belongs. Knox was actually to be killed off here, but the studio liked him so much that they wanted to have him survive in case they made a sequel. We then see Batman swoop down in the Batwing, and he grabs all the balloons with a claw, and it's one of those kind of like bat shark repellent spray where there would be no reason he would have it, but he has it nonetheless. And he has a claw on the front, and he grabs all the balloons, and he takes them out of the city and heads up towards the sky, and has a cable cutter, and he cuts the balloons, and they head off towards the heavens. And then we get another cool visual with him going up through the clouds, and for a split second, the bat plane's in front of the wing, and then he just kind of falls back down to earth and going to get the Joker. The Joker, who is very angry about Batman stealing his balloons, asks Bob for a gun before shooting him. Then he tells his men to clear the streets. and they start opening fire, telling the people to get out of there. Batman then is coming back down towards the Joker on a now empty street, and he tries to shoot the Joker with missiles, bombs, guns. He has the Joker in the bullseye, but they all miraculously miss. And the Joker pulls out a big gun from his leg, looks like a revolver, and another with pretty much comedy spot. He pulls out the big gun and he shoots the Batwing, and the Batwing crashes into the steps of Gotham City Cathedral. After the crash, Vicky runs over to the wreckage, but before she can find Batman, the Joker abducts her and takes her to the top of the cathedral. Batman then sees them going into the cathedral and follows them. When they get to the top, Joker uses his posy full of acid to melt a bracket holding one of the church bells in and send it careening down towards Batman, who is able to avoid it. But the police who are trying to also apprehend the Joker, it blocks them from ascending the stairs. Then Batman gets to the top and has to take out some of the Joker's subs. It's not known why they are there. Maybe that was the Joker's exit plan the whole time, but it's never alluded to before. But yeah, the Joker has slugs at the top of the cathedral, and Batman's able to take them all out. Vicky then sees Batman walk by, and she pretends to actually like the Joker, and she proceeds to go down on him, maybe, or make the illusion like she's going to go down on him. Before Batman appears at his side and asks him if he ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight before punching him in the face. He then proceeds to beat the shit out of the Joker for the next couple of minutes, telling him that the Joker murdered his parents, and it's because of the Joker made Batman into who he is today. The Joker spits chattering toy teeth out of his mouth. I'm not sure where those came from. And then Batman punches the Joker after they're right near the ledge, and Batman punches the Joker after Joker asks him if he would consider hitting a guy with glasses. The Joker put on glasses right before this. Joker goes over the ledge. Batman and Vicky both look over, and Joker grabs one arm of theirs each and pulls him down. A helicopter comes and the Joker attempts to escape as he leaves Batman and Vicky there. Batman then shoots some sort of wire around the Joker's leg and a gargoyle that's on the top of the cathedral. As the helicopter threw down a ladder for the Joker to climb, Joker grabs the ladder and he's trying to climb, but the gargoyle's weighing him down. Eventually, Joker falls from the helicopter down to his death, and while Batman and Vicky try to make it up the ledge to safety, they fall, and Vicky lets out her 9,000th scream for the movie, but Batman just shoots one of his grapple guns, and they're safe. Now, after this climax of the movie, Vicky tells Knox she's not covering the press conference that Dent and Gordon are at. She kisses Knox on the cheek and wishes him well. And then Dent reads a letter from the Batman saying to call him if Gotham should ever need him again. Knox asks the question, how do they call? And Gordon fires up the signal for the first time. We see Vicky walking through the street, and she's picked up by Alfred, and Alfred tells Vicky that Bruce might be a little late, and Vicky said she's not a bit surprised. As the car starts up and drives off, we pan upwards up some buildings to see Batman standing at the ledge of one of the skyscrapers staring at the signal, which is really one of my favorite shots probably of any of the Batman movies, the Dark Knight trilogy included. And then we go to credits. Now this movie, it's definitely of its time. They tried to make the movie have a timeless look. A lot of people wearing suits, a lot of just plain bland cars, but the Prince music definitely kind of dates it. But for the most part, I do think they pulled off the timeless look they were going for pretty well. But anybody can Anybody with enough knowledge can definitely tell this is a movie of the 80s. Now, my final thoughts. The positives are it's visually a great movie. The Gotham City we see at the very beginning, I think, looks awesome. The Batsuit looks awesome. The Batwing, all the Batman stuff. The the way the vehicles look, the way the suit looks, the way the Batcave looks is awesome. We don't really see much of Gotham, being that this did take place on a set. It wasn't shot in the real world like the Dark Knight trilogy was. So we see the fucking Monarch Theater a whole bunch in this movie, which is where Bruce and his parents were leaving the night that they were murdered. His parents were murdered. Now it does have a darker tone and it is pretty good, but it is serious. But when you look at what came after, like in the 2000s with the Dark Knight trilogy, it's not nearly as serious as it thought it was in 1989. Now the overwhelming negatives of the movie, which I don't really have that big of a problem with because I was a kid when I saw it the first time. Like this movie was how I was introduced to Batman, so I can't really knock it. But having Alfred let Vicky into the Batcave and having the Joker kill Bruce Wayne's parents was very controversial. I don't know if it was. It's not controversial to the general public or people in general, but just to the hardcore comic book fans, it's definitely a controversial choice. But other than that, I don't think there's any overwhelming negatives of this movie. And it's overall a pretty good movie, and it's a very important movie for comic book films. A lot of a lot of documentaries and things that talk about comic book movies cite this as kind of the template for how comic book movies would go, with X-Men being a little more serious and things like that. Batman was definitely a very, very important movie for comic book movies and for the culture in general. I give this movie 4 stars. It's not the best comic book movie ever. I mean, it probably was one of the best ones when it came out, but there was such a small sample size of those movies that you really didn't have much else to compare it to. But this is definitely a very important movie, and it's a classic. And it's the 30th anniversary of Batman. It's returning to theaters along with the other 3 movies in that original series, and I'll be reviewing those as well. So my next episode will be Batman Returns. Thank you, and I hope you check out my second Batman movie review on the Leighton Cassette podcast when I review Batman Returns.